Hey guys, what's up? It's mATX. I'm dropping 2 videos today, most likely. One will cover this brand new tower from Redragon, the MC211. The second will cover the Intel A770 build that dwells within it. But for this video, we're going to jump into the Redragon MC211. Redragon is dipping its toes back into the PC chassis arena, and I have the MC211, as I mentioned, here to look at. I did a complete new build in the tower to get a feel for working with it, and also because I wanted to try a few things for my own experience. Now, included with the tower is a small box with Velcro ties for cable management, some additional motherboard screws, and some standoffs for the chassis itself. These are very basic, important things I think should come with most towers. I have bought towers before that didn't have screws, and the motherboard didn't come with screws, so that just kind of leaves you screwed, if you will. The MC211 is an mATX up to an mATX chassis that sits off the ground just shy of about 2 inches and features LED strips on both the left and right side. The strips are nice looking, but limited functionality between just reactive sound and some simple streaming lights. Fortunately, it can be tied into your motherboard via a header for a 5-volt ARGB, and this will allow you to select different modes of lighting that more match your tower's whole feel. The bottom level of the chassis, and everywhere this exists for this fact, has a super compact metal mesh, which they call Honeycomb, but it's not really a honeycomb design, and offers a little bit of breathability, but this kind of metal mesh that's this compact is also a little bit airflow restrictive when it comes to fans. You may also notice that there's no dust cover in sight, which would make easy cleaning just wonderful, but it's not here. Little magnetic dust covers would have been great. Under the chassis is also a missed opportunity, in my opinion, for a fan mount for some downward exhaust. Below the GPU, that is. Like right below the GPU, some externally installed downward exhaust fan, sort of a fan bracket. Something like that would have been great. I'll explain why I feel this way and why I think it was an important missed opportunity in a moment. The left side facing the tower is a tempered glass panel which sits with 4 notches. It's the first time I have seen a resting notch design, and overall it doesn't bother me. But I will warn you, be careful with it. Just 4 little notches that hold that glass panel into place. The front of the tower has 3 soft snaps on each the left side and the right side, and it's vented but away from any real meaningful airflow. It also features a tempered glass panel. The overall quality of the metal used is pretty hefty and durable, strong, and not flimsy like I initially expected it to be. The right side panel is all metal mesh design like we saw everywhere else, and when they did this they had airflow in mind, but again it's a little bit restrictive. I am mildly off-put by the lacking area for exhaust in the back though. As it may appear in pictures that can support up to a 120mm fan, it cannot. It's simply just an open vent area. And this is the main reason I think it was a missed downward exhaust opportunity. I think that's a real shame. That would have been a great place to have some downward exhaust to take heat right from where that GPU is going to be generating it and just throw it out the bottom because there's so much clearance. The only true locations to install fans, you can put 2 120s at the top or 2 120s directly to the right of the motherboard. Then next is kind of deciding your orientation. Do you want the right side to be your intake or your exhaust? Well, if you're up against a wall, you don't want it to be intake. But if you're not, that might be a good option for intake. There's not really a lot of options to go with, and as long as the case is somewhat open to the area around it, your orientation really won't matter, whether you're exhausting from the side or intaking from the side, or exhausting from the top or intaking from the top. But those are really your only 2 main options. Now, if I haven't mentioned the top, the sides, the front, they can all be removed to make working in this tower fairly easy to do. And they all come off fairly easily, but I will say I think these were supposed to be captive screws, and be careful because they didn't captivate very well. They just sort of fell out. Now, I hate bendy brakes in towers. I really hate it. I think it's kind of a cheap thing to do. The cutouts where the GPU expansion slots, your PCIe expansion slots, these have bendy brakes, and I'm sure there's a more technical term for it. You know what I'm talking about when I say bendy brakes though. And this tower has bendy brakes. So make sure you know which one you're bendy braking before you go bendy braking it. The PSU is mounted sideways behind the motherboard tray, and if you go with up to a standard ATX size PSU, the chassis will support it, but only just barely. It is a tight fit in there. It's a small tower that looks like it has a lot more room to work in than it actually has. That being said, I did make my own life a little bit harder than it needed to be because I used some cable extensions for some accent aesthetics, and this created a more cramped area to cable manage. Sometimes beautiful cable management is a nice thing to be able to do, but in all honesty, if you give me a place where I can hide cables out of the way of any crucial airflow, they're going to get neatly crammed out of sight. Sorry, that's just how that's going to happen for me. Just above the PSU is where the cables get managed, and if you have a lot of cram management, it may take up your physical drive space, as this is where you would mount your physical drives, whether they're 2.5 inch or 3 inch drives, or a 3 inch drive I should say. This will likely need to be removed, this tray right above the PSU, because there's just not a lot of great options for routing non-custom cables, especially throughout the chassis, which is really surprising again, because it just looks like it would be easy to manage your cables in this, and I just didn't have the best time managing and cramming cables in this. On the right side of the motherboard tray, there's an extension that can be removed if you're going mATX, but but it's pretty necessary for the mATX mounting. I would also say it's recommended, worth keeping it there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It has to do with grommets. Because that little extension, that protrusion, it covers up 3 grommets that you're going to come through, and let's talk about the grommets. These are bad grommets. The slightest pushing of cable seems to frustratingly dislodge them from their nested spot. They are kind of a low quality, and they're going to need to be held still with one of your fingers while you're pushing cables through, or they're going to just pop off. Sometimes they just decide after it's all put together that they're going to pop off anyways later. They don't fit their spot very well. I did find overall building in this tower a little bit frustrating, but I will say once it's all together, I was a content potato. I want my towers to be easy to work in. The worst frustrating experience I think I ever had was building in those 2 Crystal 570X towers I used to have. I hated working in those. This one was not nearly as bad as working in that Crystal 570X, but it did feel a little bit irritating. Oh, real quick too, if you're an AIO kind of guy or gal, the only real spot for mounting an AIO is going to be to the right side of the motherboard, and it's only going to accommodate up to a 240mm. While probably not impossible to get one at the top, you're very likely going to have some clearance issues, especially depending on what motherboard you choose. And it's not really designed to accommodate a radiator and 2 120mm fans, so just keep that in mind. Also, when it comes to radiators in this tower, if you're someone that's going to be overly concerned with restrictive airflow and the lack thereof being able to pull in fresh air, and you're going to decide to use a radiator, you're going to be sort of giving up that spot, and you're going to have a lot more restrictive airflow than you already would have just going air cooling. The other need to know notes is my cooler is 126mm tall and falls just shy of kissing that glass panel, so keep that in mind if you're in the I'm thinking about what I want to get phase, that I think 130mm is barely pushing the limit. I know it said it was rated for 140 originally, but I did send them pictures of this and I said I'm not sure. I have a 150 that I put in there which protruded out very far. I don't know that a 140 is going to fit. If it does, it'll be just barely, and I guess it depends on how they measure it, but this is a 126 that I have in there, and it comes just shy of kissing that panel. As far as GPU goes, it has a good sizable room to work in there with a GPU. I'm using the Arc A770 in this one. It's a 280mm GPU and has plenty of room left for larger GPUs. It can accommodate up to 320mm, falling just shy of the official support of something as large as a 3090 or a 4090. So that's the chassis, the Redragon MC211, and I'll end this video that talks mainly about the chassis, and part 2 will drop separate after this video, where I talk a little bit about the build. Now, I'm not going super scientific or anything. I'm going to be talking mainly about the consumer experience I've had with the A770, and trying to offer you guys some just consumer level insight, some end user degree of opinion. Anyways, I hope this was somewhat helpful and useful to you. I'll see you guys in the next video I do. You guys have a great day, night, whatever it is.